It really is. The family had to be evacuated by a US Army helicopter from the presidential palace to save them from the mob, as millions of angry Filipinos made Manila ungovernable. And now the son returns in triumph to the scene of the father's disgrace. The father got away with looting the state for something up to 10 billion US dollars. The state has only managed to recover from the family about 3 billion of that. The rest of the money, goodness knows, but a lot of it seems to have been spent on campaigning for Bongbong, the son Marcos's return to power, or ascent to power, and his astonishing social media campaign. It seems to have combined with other factors to just completely, in the words of Maria Ressa, the Philippines journalist who won the Nobel Prize for her fearless reporting, she said, history has shifted before our eyes as social media was just swamped with this revisionist story of Marcos, who was this horrible looter, abuser of human rights and dictator, has now been rehabilitated to be a great national hero and a victim of elite persecution, and his son brought back. So the combination of flooding social media with a new narrative, the fact that most Filipinos are young, average age is very young in the Philippines, and most don't have any direct memory of those years, and the fact that a fortune has been spent on this rehab job. It's all come together to produce this astonishing outcome.
Yes. One thing is this doctored image of what the previous Marcos regime was like. But on that social media campaigning, there was an absolute vacuum of policies, a vacuum of what his vision might be for the Filipinos. So why did they turn to him in so many, in such large numbers?
Well, you're right, Bev, and the absence of any real policy or scrutiny has made it very hard to know what this bloke intends to do with his newfound power. He's the first candidate for the presidency in decades who refused to participate in any of the pre-election debates and avoided mainstream media interviews altogether and only talked to sympathetic media outlets. So he is a bit of a blank space, and that's a bit of a worry. But the vacuity of his policy platform has been simply overpowered. One element has been the Philippines has always been a country that loves a little bit of a persona, a touch of Hollywood. They're not so much interested in the substance. That's always been the case in the Philippines. But it's also the fact that this victory represents the union of two great dynasties, the outgoing President Duterte, who has a powerful family dynasty of his own. His daughter, Sarah, has joined as vice president with Bongbong Marcos as president. So that brings those two families, those two big, wealthy, powerful dynasties now together. And that produces a lot of patronage, a lot of networks, a lot of profile. And the West isn't entirely free of dynastic politics itself. One of the funny elements of coverage of this election, Bev, has been US coverage, which is full of tutting about the loss of democratic mores in the Philippines and overlooking the fact that this bloke's father was a US-backed strongman and dictator, and the fact that the US has some strong dynasties of its own, including the Clintons and Bushes ruling in Washington. So it's not the only country in the world subject to these syndromes, but it is subject to big personality cult, and it is subject to dynastic politics.
One of the key questions will be, I mean, his predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte, was sort of all over the place when it came to a relationship with China. Do we have an idea as to how he will treat China, given there are some contested issues between the Philippines and China?
Well, he said very little about it. A couple of things he has said. One is that he thinks that the only option for dealing with China is a bilateral negotiation. As you know, Bev, the Philippines took China successfully to the International Tribunal in The Hague over China's claim of maritime territories that were also claimed by the Philippines. The Philippines won that case. The tribunal found that China had no legal basis to its claim. But Bongbong Marcos has said it's not an arbitration if only one of the parties respects the outcome. Therefore, it's effectively, he said, it's useless. And so the country will be reduced to a bilateral discussion with China. So that's one pretty strong clue. He said that the US relationship is important but could be recalibrated, and left that hanging. But a couple of indicators we have in the absence of anything firmer from a more sort of articulated policy. One is we know that he's an Anglophile. He spent time at Oxford, as well as the Wharton Business School in the US, and had his son educated in Britain. We know that he doesn't have a sort of fetish for the other strongman leaders like Putin or Xi Jinping. And these at least are helpful indicators that the guy mightn't be quite as smitten, shall we say, with Xi Jinping or other strongman characters as his predecessor, Duterte.
You talk about those two dynasties, though, that have come together with Marcos and Duterte. Are we sure that the same sort of path won't be followed as his father took, that the sort of brutality, the state capture?
Oh, absolutely not. All the indications are it will be exactly in that model. The overwhelming political power that these two dynasties bring, the fact that they have both come from backgrounds with autocratic and corrupt tendencies, the fact that they've shown very scant regard for democratic mores, for scrutiny, suggests that we are looking at exactly that sort of routine. And the fact that Bongbong Marcos's own power and political movement is based on ill-gotten gains from his father's looting of the state, all of these things portend to a pretty illiberal democracy. But he is a new leader. We have to live in hope.
And we do that every week. Peter, good to talk. Thank you so much.
It's the only way to get through, Bev.
Absolutely.